Good evening and welcome to the first webinar of 2023 of the Green Party's Coordinated Campaign Committee. So I want to thank everyone for coming. We had a large amount of people signing up, also for our hosts and guests. Before we get started, I wanted to provide a little information about the Coordinated Campaign Committee. And one of our committee members would like to highlight our call for nominations for some new members coming up, and then I'll introduce our host and we'll move on. The Coordinated Campaign Committee is a standing committee of the Green Party of the United States. We cooperate with state and local chapters in the support of federal, state, and local Green Party electoral campaigns with a variety of different programs and support functions. We handle everything but president. That has a committee all to itself. We're currently engaged in, we cooperate with state and local parties. We coordinate where needed and support all these candidates. We try to track all Green Party candidates at all levels of government. We try to facilitate discussions regarding electoral strategy among state parties. We also provide training and materials support for Green Party candidates and activists. We have, I'm going to type in a moment, I'm going to put in the notes the CCC or Coordinated Campaign Committee website, and you can find the campaign manual, other kits, other bits and pieces of information and resources, and a list of our webinars, most of which are recorded. When these monthly webinars generally follow the campaign calendar pattern, not always. Tonight's webinar is kind of a back by popular demand. We closed out our 2022 with debriefing the candidate or debriefing our campaign. And there was interest in a second round, hearing more directly from a few of the candidates. And there will be more because more candidates are interested and more in some strategic capacity. We had candidates who had a notable campaign for one reason or another, reaching out on media with particular vote strategy or reaching out. And so we're going to be having more of these campaign webinars and then the basics, just like, fundraising, hopefully setting up your website, GOTV and that sort of thing. And so we already have more expressed interest. So we will just stay tuned. If you're interested and want to get on our mailing list, ccc@gp.org, and I'll put that in the chat too. So stay tuned and sign up to receive more webinar announcements. We also analyze past campaigns for lessons learned, and some of this is happening tonight. So here's our general here, and here's if you want to get in touch with us. One more quick thing. No, never mind. I'm done with that. So I want to turn over just briefly to Scott Lagenauer, a member of our committee, because we are elected. There's staggered elections every year. We have 10 members, and we have some seats coming open. So Scott, you wanted to mention something about this.
Great. Hello, everybody. And it's great to see so many people on the call today. And I just want to be very brief. The Coordinated Campaign Committee just announced elections for 5 seats out of the 10 on the committee. And I'm encouraging all candidates, former candidates, anybody with a passion to help candidates to put your name up for consideration, either yourself or somebody you think would do a good job. By January 23rd, we need to have all nominations in with an approval from a state party as well. To be on the ballot. Then the National Committee will go into a discussion and vote. I'm happy we're getting this started at the beginning of the year, which we've always been supposed to do, but my understanding is we haven't always done it as early as this. As somebody who joined the committee in May of last year, I noticed that we weren't in a position to do very much to support at least the newly elected members to support local candidates in races that happen well before November. So by bringing on some new members early in the year, I think we'll be very better positioned to have monthly webinars on topics that the new committee and candidates think is important, and also to support some of these elections that are happening mostly municipal and local earlier in the year than the traditional November, when everybody has always been apparently most excited. But I'm excited especially to have the committee form to support these earlier races as well. So I encourage anybody to put their name up, send an email to ccc@gp.org if you or anybody has any questions about the committee, and we will all enthusiastically get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And I will just go back and mention what I was going to and didn't. We work with a pool of associates, which at least one liaison from each affiliated state party, not already represented on the committee. And we have other staff and others. If you are interested in helping track elections, we've got a pretty good roster at this point, but if you want to help track elections and you are interested, especially if you're interested in elections geek stuff and would be interested, or if you think if you're not sure if your state has one, please go ahead and write ccc@gp.org, and we will be glad to set you up with as part of our team. So I want to get back to the webinar now, and we have one more person waiting. Okay. But back to the webinar, I'll introduce our host, and then he'll introduce the guest for tonight. And I just want to say, for those wondering, all of these, I think, were spectacular candidates. We had more, and we will have more on upcoming campaign webinars, so stay tuned. I'm going to introduce Michael Feinstein, the moderator for tonight. He's overseeing the ongoing work of the elections database, and he put that in the chat room too, if you're interested in checking that out. By way of career, Mike Feinstein is a former Green mayor and city council member of Santa Monica, California, and one of the founding members of the state California. So, Michael, I will hand it over to you. Take it away. And I hope he's got.
Great. Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Holly, and greetings to everybody. Glad you could join us. If you're interested in a viable multi-party democracy and what it's like to run for public office as a Green Party candidate, you've come to the right place. We have 4 exciting candidates tonight from 2022 that we're going to hear from. And I'm going to give a little bit of background, and then we're going to ask a question of each one. But the 4 of them, in the order that I'm going to ask them questions, are Cody Hanna, who ran for city council in Chandler, Arizona; Robin Harris, who ran for state legislature, the state house in Florida; Matthew Ho, who ran for U.S. Senate in North Carolina; and Douglas Lary, who ran for registrar of voters in Connecticut.
What is this?
So a lot of people, somebody might want to turn off their mute themselves there, who's talking in the background. So a lot of people, when they think about the Green Party, they think about our presidential candidates, and they say, oh, you know, Greens only run for president, and they should run for more down ticket office. Greens have run for 6,530 races since the first Green ran in the United States in 1985. And out of those, 39.3%, 2,565, have run for state and federal office, and the overwhelming majority, 60.7%, 3,965, have run for county, municipal, school board, and special district offices. So the old adage of think globally and run locally has been in practice with the Green Party for a long time. And of those 3,965 local races, 1,372 Greens have been elected, which is about 35%. So about 35% of the Greens who are running for local office are getting elected, a pretty spectacular success rate. And one of the things that's really important to remember is when you look at those numbers, on one hand, you can say, okay, that's impressive. Greens aren't only running for the top of the ticket, they're running down ticket as well. But when you decide to run as a Green Party member, you could have the same politics running as a Green, or say you decide to run inside the Democrats as a DSA-backed candidate, for example. But when you decide to run as a Green, you're making a choice to give up a lot of institutional support that comes from people who've decided to try and work within the 2 major parties, and instead you're trying to expand the system. So people who make that choice, these numbers, you could say Greens should be running in more races, but it's a big choice to decide to be independent from the duopoly. And it's important to always, when people ask about how the Green Party is doing, to remind them that we can't compare our candidates to progressives who try and run within the system. It's a much bigger hill to climb when you're deciding to go independent. And that's what makes these races so impressive by all these candidates. We're going to start with Cody, and Cody, again, ran for city council in Chandler, Arizona as a write-in, and he received 930 votes as a write-in candidate, which is the most write-in votes that any Green candidate in a municipal race in U.S. Green history. Very, very impressive. So, Cody, please both do a short introduction of yourself, and then what was it like to run as a first-time candidate, and especially as a younger candidate? And please tell us your age. And then how did you accomplish this incredible result as a write-in?
Sure. So my name's Cody Hanna. I'm 24 years old. I live here in Chandler, Arizona, in the Phoenix metropolitan area. I worked with the Arizona Green Party, the Green Party of Maricopa County, and the Young Eco-Socialist Caucus of Arizona. I've been involved since about 2020 or so, 2019, 2020. I really had no intention of running for office in 2022. I was kind of, peer pressured into it. Here in Arizona, we really wanted to make sure that after not really having a whole lot of candidates available for people to vote for in the previous election, that we really wanted to make sure that voters here in Arizona, whether they be at the municipal level or some at the county and state level, had candidates that they could vote for and support and feel good about doing. So I definitely was not feeling, when I turned in the paperwork, I did not necessarily feel like I was ready or prepared to run for office, but I sort of, having done it now, I sort of feel like nobody probably ever does. And I think that, especially running as a Green, a write-in candidate, and as a youth candidate, somebody in the 18 to 35 age range, I think there is a lot of obstacles that are ahead for somebody who kind of fits in all three of those boxes. But I was really pleasantly surprised by the campaign that we ran. I got to meet a lot of really awesome activists and local voters here in Chandler. I've become friends with one of our former elected school board members, Lindsay Love. I have been in contact with our local chapter of Planned Parenthood and some of their activists. And yeah, I think that, my campaign, for only being, 2.5 or 3 months or so, really blew even my own expectations out of the water. So I was really, really proud of the work we did.
And how did you get people to actually write you in? What are the mechanics of that? Because a lot of us hear, oh, if you write the name in wrong, or you don't know where to put it on the ballot. How did you get that message out to voters?
Yeah, so I think the actual mechanics of doing a write-in vote weren't really the biggest issue. You make one announcement showing a sample ballot where they're supposed to do it, and that's perfectly fine. But I think the bigger thing is really convincing people that it is worth it to write your name on the ballot rather than to fill in the bubble by somebody who is on the ballot. And I think the fact that we were able to get about 930 people to go out of their way to find my name initially and then write it on their ballots is really cool. But I think it's really, especially here in a local election, it was really about presenting a very different kind of vision for what we need in our government. And it was a vision that I think here locally in Chandler was not really being discussed by either the Democrats or Republicans. Chandler has nonpartisan elections, but the weight of the Democratic and Republican parties here locally can definitely be felt still here in these local elections. So I think part of it came down to a lot of more progressive people really not being happy with the AZ Dem approved slate for the Chandler City Council. And I think the other part of it is really just, there is a subset of people, however small it may be, that are really ready for something different politically. And I think getting people to the point where they feel comfortable with writing in a Green or voting for a Green really comes down to making sure that, we're presenting a message that is appealing and modern and fresh. And I think that hopefully in some small way here in Chandler, we did that in 2022.
Great. Thanks so much. Next, we're going to go to Robin Harris, who ran for State House in Florida. And of all the Greens, going back to that 6,530 number of Greens who have run for office in our history, 970, about 15% have run for the lower house in state legislatures around the country. So this is actually one of the offices that Greens contest the most. Robin got a very high 18.55%. Robin, please both introduce yourself, and in your campaign's website, it said people over profit, leadership that liberates, and you ran against a Republican with no Democrat in the race. What was it like to try and put out that kind of message with your campaign?
Well, my candidate actually is a Democrat.
Ah.
Yeah, and so he was a former incumbent. So this race is pretty interesting. The initial candidate got beat by the former incumbent in the primaries.
So you went up against a non-incumbent
Yes,
in your race, a one-on-one.
yes. And so difficult because of so many things that we faced. But actually, you know, the arrogance was there because he did very little campaigning. We kept on the ground. We knocked on doors. But some of the debates I was not invited to. We were purposely not invited. So I think throughout the candidacy, I think altogether, I was able to attend about 2 to 3 events. And but speaking of Republicans, in the campaign closer to election, we used some technology where, you know, we use robocalls, and it called about approximately 5,000 to 7,000 people in our district. And I got called back from Republicans. And I actually had very, very, very good conversations with some Republican constituents in my district, and I was able to secure their vote and support.
So your campaign talked about a bunch of different types of justice: reparatory justice, housing justice, healthcare justice, environmental justice, and, although I didn't use the word, community-led policing. How did those concepts apply in your district, and how did you separate yourself from your Democratic opponent with those platform positions?
Sure. So all of those things that I stand for, that was on my platform, those are things that, since I've lived in Florida and of course other places too, that I've actively, as an advocate, as a social justice activist and an organizer, we've just been those things. Those are my lived experiences. My candidate, my opponent has never shown up for any of those platform ideas or ideology. He is hated by labor groups, even though, ironically, I did not secure an endorsement from SEIU or any of those organizations. But labor groups do not like him because he's been in opposition against them. He's very soft on policing because, of course, he sometimes takes funding from police. And so what separates me is that I've been very vocal. Like I said, I've shown up for reparatory justice. I've shown up standing out against policing issues that have negatively impacted our communities. So we've been there, and I humbly say that. Even as most of you know, that Hurricane Ian was the recent hurricane that came through Florida. We worked in disaster relief. My opponent, who has lied about where he lives at in the district, could not show up in our district because he doesn't live in the district. But myself and other amazing people, we were on the ground for those impacted individuals during disaster relief. So I guess, in short, to say that those platform ideas and strategies and things that you see on my platform are things that I actually live. and unlike my opponent, unfortunately.
So people often jest about the Green Party. It's not easy being green. There's the Kermit the Frog, etc. But you mentioned that you didn't get labor endorsement, even though they didn't like your opponent and they resonated with your ideas. Why do you think that you weren't able to get those endorsements of local labor?
Well, sure, I've made calls to those folks that, because when I ran as county commissioner, that was the NPA race, I secured the SEIU endorsement with no issue, and basically it was because I was not a Democrat, I was a Green, and out of their own mouth, the SEIU, some of the higher ups told me that they were afraid that if I didn't win, that what type of relationship they would have with the person that did win. And so my argument was, well, you don't have one with him now, so you really don't have anything to lose. So, and you lack honesty, and so you've lost my respect, not just because you didn't endorse me, but because your values obviously don't line up. So, and of course there were more things said, but so yeah, that's where we stand with labor unions now.
Great, thank you, Robin. And speaking about going up against a Democratic Party machine, we have example 1A of this last year of Matthew Ho running for U.S. Senate in North Carolina, where, and Matt can talk a little bit more about it, but he had to fight very hard to even get on the ballot. The Democrats trying to keep him off. Matt, you really ran a historic campaign. It had a national profile. I know you've got more to tell than you can possibly get into this short period, but please tell us a little bit about your background, especially your anti-war experience, and what was your campaign like? What were your biggest achievements, your biggest challenges?
Oh, thanks, Mike. And thank you all for putting this together and for everyone for joining tonight. And it's nice to see a lot of people, including some people I know who have never seen your face before. So it's always nice. So my background, I was in the Marine Corps and State Department. I resigned in protest over the escalation of the Afghan war. That kind of put me into a public sphere. It put me into the public sphere. And for the last 13 years or so, been doing a lot of work out of Washington, D.C., anti-war work, human rights work, but also too with advocacy groups and on-the-ground groups like Code Pink or Veterans for Peace. Also had a lot of interaction in Congress, a lot of time with members of Congress. I was on the board of directors for a PAC for 5 years. So I had different experiences like that going into this, but I had not been a candidate before, and I had not worked on a campaign before like this. The first thing we had to do here in North Carolina was get ballot access. So the North Carolina Green Party had begun that process the year prior. So they lost their ballot access in November 2020, and February 2021, they began the process of getting it back. That really kind of shifted into higher gear in the winter of 2022. We announced our campaign as part of that process in order to do a number of things, get attention, help fundraise, bring people in. We thought having a statewide campaign would work very well in parallel with a statewide ballot access program. And I think there were things about that worked out well, particularly the fundraising, because we had to get about 14,000 verified signatures. We collected 22,500 signatures. Of that, about 95% was done in-house. Through the Green Party, through people we brought in, people who were part of the campaign, so whether they were Greens or Independents or Socialists, folks. So not only were we out there getting the signatures, but it was also our folks, right? So you had the ability to canvass as you were collecting signatures. And I think that was very important for us as well. Just that ability to be able to talk to people, listen to people, explain who we are, et cetera. We succeeded. We were successful. We got 8,000 more signatures than we needed, whatever the number was. I forgot. All this stuff has kind of left my head in the last 2 months. But the June 1st comes, we submit our signatures for certification, and we are obstructed and eventually denied by the State Board of Elections, which is Democratic Party controlled because the governor's a Democrat, so the Democratic Party has the advantage on the State Board of Elections. Not only that, as soon as that process had begun where we were submitting for certification as a party in the state, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee got involved. So it wasn't just the North Carolina Democratic Party that we were up against, but the DSCC. And that ended up in a series of lawsuits. We were in U.S. District Court, Federal Appeals Court, State Court, and we got a lot of media attention because of this. Double-edged sword with the media attention because it's media attention, and we had a lot of great support from independent media. So on places talking about our campaign and what was happening to us, like on Jimmy Dore or Krista Ball or Brianna Joy Gray. At the same time, too, though, the questions that we were getting were often, hey, Matt, when did you stop committing fraud? So that's why I say it was a double-edged sword, but particularly with the local media, which was covered us greatly over the summer when we were being accused of fraud.
That's because the Democrats were saying that there was fraud?
That's correct. Yeah, no, we didn't commit fraud. Yeah, exactly. That was just to take a step back, what the State Board of Elections, how they denied us and how they delayed us was they said that, figure most people here are familiar with the petitioning process, right? So you're always going to have signatures that are not verified. They took a bunch of our signatures, said, these look fishy. This casts a doubt then on all the other signatures. So literally it was about a tranche of signatures of maybe about 150 signatures that they said were suspect. They then used that to say, we have questions now about the other 22,350 signatures that you collected. And because we have questions, we can't certify you as a party, right? And then there were deadlines that were all baked into this, right? So we were supposed to be certified by July 1st. So this is why we have to go to federal court to get a judge to overturn that. So, we had good media coverage, like I said, in the sense of the story being told. We had 5 stories by the Associated Press, 3 national NPR stories, a lot of local coverage. But again, it's always wrapped around the Green Party committed fraud. So we get out of all of that at the end of August. I think August 21st was when the DSCC dropped its appeal in federal appeals court, and the North Carolina Democratic Party did the same in state court at the same time. And that gave us about 3 months to run our campaign. At that point, the media coverage went from where we were very much involved with the media over the summer to basically nothing for the rest of the campaign.
Matt, you said how running a statewide campaign really helped to build the party. At the same time, you ran a statewide campaign for U.S. Senate in what was, at least going into the general election, perceived to be a very competitive race, with the idea that possibly control of the U.S. Senate could hinge on that race. And presumably the Democrats put out the old, hey, the Green is going to be a spoiler argument. Matt Elias, who helped to lead the fight from the Democratic Senatorial Committee against you, who is working in a good way for election integrity in other places, but fought against it in North Carolina. Presumably they were trying to put the spoiler dynamic on you. When you're on the campaign trail, was that an issue, meeting regular voters, or was that something that was just top down coming from the Democrats?
Yeah, absolutely not. You rarely heard that at all. We encountered enthusiasm, whether we were out there petitioning or whether we were out campaigning. We tried to do as many public events as we could, of course, across the state. But we met enthusiasm for other options, right? Enthusiasm for change, in general, derision, dismay, disgust, over the current political and electoral system. The thing about that, of course, is how many people can you meet in a day? With 7.4 million registered voters in North Carolina, that was always the issue and always will be the issue. How do you reach that mass of people? But in terms of being out there and talking to people and trying to make connections and bringing people into the party and beginning the process of getting people to understand that, hey, there is organized activity that's trying to fix this, that's trying to change it, that's trying to make it better. I think we did a pretty good job of reaching people that way in terms of building a foundation, right? Starting to build networks, starting to build infrastructure, and I was going to say the excuse me.
Water is life.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Mia Canini, right? Mia, excuse me. I'm not going to try and pronounce it. I've obviously got something. Hang on. Sorry.
No problem.
But yeah, anyway, I wanted to say that, we were able to build a good team here. We had great staff. We were able to do do fundraising to a level that was really helped by what we were going through with the battles with the Democratic Party and the national attention we were getting. We were able to bring in fundraising that allow us to pay a staff, through the campaign. And I mean, so all the credit in terms of the things that we did well, the things that we want to look at and say, oh yeah, definitely you want to replicate that. Certainly that belongs to all the different people who were involved on the campaign, and filled it out in so many different ways.
One more question in terms of how you were trying to reach voters. And I understand you raised about $200,000, which is on the high end for most Green candidates in history in this country. You got some pretty big name progressives who did events with you. Rose Roby, your campaign manager, I know ran some incredible online events with some of these big names who were willing to lend their name to your campaign. How did you get some of those folks? Who were they? How did you get them to actually take the risk of joining with you?
Yeah, and actually I did see a question pop up here from Mary, and just to answer her question, she asked about how many of 7.4 million registered voters in North Carolina, how many registered Green. On election day, we had 290 registered Green Party members in North Carolina. So we had 290, and we got 29,000 votes. So we kind of feel good about that in the sense that we got 100 times many votes as we have registered members, right? So I think that was a decent metric to kind of look at it. But in terms of how did we get a lot of these prominent progressives, celebrities, well-known names I had a lot of experience with different organizations and groups, and then of course other people, new people, and it was just the old-fashioned asking. Pick up the phone and ask people to do it. In terms of bringing in people like Medea Benjamin, Medea is somebody I've worked with for 13 years now. In terms of, say, bringing in Richard, we did something with Richard Wolf. That was Tony Ndege just calling his people and getting it done. Roger Waters, of course, was the big one. And,
from Pink Floyd.
From Pink Floyd, yeah, it was a big one. And that was, I had gotten in touch and become friends with Roger through people at Veterans for Peace. But really, that was Rose Roby, campaign manager, who did all that, making sure it happened. Right. And that's what I said before about the people we had. We couldn't have raised $200,000, done the different things we did. And there's a lot of things we didn't do well, a lot of things that we would do differently if we had the opportunity, of course. But the things that we did do well is because we had talented, passionate people who were willing to take things on and take the initiative in getting things done. And so I think we performed pretty well for, a campaign that was a grassroots campaign. Anything you compare that to what the Democrats, Republicans do with their professionals, I think we did pretty well.
Great, thanks so much. Our fourth guest is Douglas Lary, who ran for Registrar of Voters in Connecticut, and that's actually a position that a lot of people don't know about it. So, Douglas, as part of your commentary here, please tell us what that office is about. But you also wear many hats in Connecticut, both from your own campaign to helping to organize other candidates and keeping track of Greens who are running across the state. So, what kind of challenges did your state party face going into this election cycle? What was the electoral strategy? Where were you successful? Where were you not? How were the laws around ballot access affecting your party?
Thanks, Mike. Indeed, when the chat room here was basically asking for election geeks. I would qualify. I'm one of those back office guys. I'm not as often the candidate as I am the person who's creating the walk list or in finding out which districts have rarely had two major party candidates and we should try the run there. So I'm essentially one of the Connecticut Green Party's 5 data analysts, and I approach it from that perspective. Professionally, I'm a paid election worker in Connecticut. I'm a regional election monitor for 16 towns. And so I have professional responsibilities for maintaining the integrity of the election, everything from the machinery to training of staff, et cetera. And I'm basically the backup technical guy for the people who are frontline in that role, in those roles. In the Green Party itself, Justin, who is here attending, for instance, routinely got lists from me of voters in his district. And when I knew them, the email addresses for such people. I work with John Schwenk, who's also with us. He's in my local town committee. And together we try to keep the locals together. Windham, Connecticut, where I live, has an unusually high level of green activity. We elected 6 out of 9 roles we ran for in 2021. And so in 2022, I hadn't anticipated actually being a candidate. I was on a petition as a stand-in for Secretary of State because of my knowledge of the field. But that petition failed. And then in the last few weeks of the season, we had an open ballot slot for this role called Registrar of Voters. It's a paid position. It does all the registration work for voters and runs the election sites and so forth. And I usually am supporting such people, but in this case, I actually ran for the office. I've run for that office twice before because I know the topic. It's a paid position in my town, and in the rest of Connecticut towns, the pay varies from $900 a year to $80,000, depending on the scale of the town. So it's a race we've enjoyed. We've run for this race, this office 6 times in a row, and we'll probably run for it again, because one of the things we like about running for this race is people who run for Registrar of Voters always win in Connecticut. I mean, all Democrats and all Republicans win this office, but they're on the ballot. They can't lose. The state law has it so that the 2 major parties always win this office. If you're a third,
So they're guaranteed a seat.
They're guaranteed to succeed. So they never lose. And so the odd reputation is that these people always win. And so by getting on the ballot and running for Registrar of Voters, we sometimes wind up with that perspective from the voters too. They just assume it's, if you're on there, that you win. And it's very good for name recognition. One of our party members, Dagmar Knoll, ran for Registrar of Voters in 2016, and then in 2017 ran for town council and then got reelected later. So it's pretty good for reputation building because it's not policy driven. This is a job. If you become a Registrar of Voters in Connecticut, you're expected to perform election work in a nonpartisan manner. And so it's a good way of being taken seriously, especially if you actually do the work. I've run elections, I've helped train people. And so that's why I got involved in that.
So Connecticut has an interesting ballot access law. For most of us around the country, when our state parties try and qualify for the ballot, it's statewide. You're either on the ballot as a state party or you're not. In Connecticut, it's different. How is that different? And how did that affect your strategy in 2022?
Well, in 2022, we were reaching a point of near desperation. In Connecticut, you get to be a minor party, which has significant benefits, if you have achieved 1% in a statewide race in the most recent election where there was such an office. That could be president, US Senate, or 5 constitutional offices in Connecticut. If you don't achieve 1% for any one of those candidates, you lose the ability to register Greens statewide, and so you don't even know who your members are. And we reached a point where we had gradually over time lost more and more of these 1% oriented elections for races we never expected to win, governor and such. And we had just one left this year. And although we tried the petition, we weren't as successful as Matthew was, and in the midst of COVID and other troubles. And we did not get enough candidates to ballot. And so in 2022, we lost minor party status here in Connecticut, and we are now what's considered a local party. In Connecticut, if you win 1% of a congressional district, then you can register Greens in that congressional district. If you win 1% on the east side of town, well, you can register Greens on the east side of town. But you can't register Greens where they haven't been successful running.
So you were able in a couple of races then to get 1%.
Correct.
But not on the statewide level.
One of the 5 congressional districts, 3 of the Senate districts, and a few registrar of voters races. So altogether, we have 40 out of 169 towns where we can now still register Greens. But that means we've lost awareness of many college campuses where we won't know which newly registered voters thought of themselves as Green. And that's been a big advantage for years. And so this is important to win back in 2024.
So 2 follow-up questions, and then we'll go back to our other friends here. You mentioned in some of our correspondence before before tonight's call that one of the races you ran in was to show up and attack a candidate who had opposed ranked choice voting. And I want to ask you, if ranked choice voting was in place in Connecticut, do you think you'd be getting the needed percentage of the vote in more of the races?
Yes, indeed. One of the reasons we want ranked choice voting is so that those who do get elected can hear who else was appreciated or what other policies were of interest to voters. We think we would get more votes if people understood that we weren't spoilers. Your second choice, if it becomes a tight race between other candidates, would still count. But a lot of people are concerned that if they vote for us, that the bad guys will win, whoever they consider the bad guys to be in this binary state. Our state's quickly becoming quite purple. It had been fairly deep blue. The east side in particular is drifting very hard red. And so we've become a purple state, and only gerrymandering keeps us as blue as we appear to be in the Electoral College.
And the final question is, how is this change, this downgrading of the ballot status for the Green Party of Connecticut going to affect the possibility that if the Green Party of the United States runs a presidential candidate in 2024, which is likely, how is that going to affect the ability to get on the ballot in Connecticut?
Well, we'll have a lot of trouble identifying precisely the type of people who are most likely to sign and circulate petitions. College students in particular at, say, Yale, New Haven, or UConn in Mansfield, just immediately next door. For years, I've known which young new voters have signed up Green without any help from us. I mean, these are people who came to the Green Party without being influenced by our outreach. And knowing who those people were was always useful for petitioning efforts. People who had chosen us first as their first party. And now we will not have that visibility at many large colleges in Connecticut, because where we tend to have kept our ability to register isn't necessarily where the big university towns were.
Got it. Got it. All right, I'm going to return back in reverse order and go back to Matthew, and kind of in this portion here nearing the end of our call. If you're going to be talking to and recruiting possible Green candidates in the future, based on what you learned in your race, what would you be saying? And in particular, Matt, in your case, since you're a bigger name than generally tends to run, and we're glad that you made that choice. If you were going to be talking to future well-connected political activists in the future who arguably put their reputation on the line by choosing to run with an independent party like the Green Party, why is it worth it for them? And in particular, was there an issue or two that you really were different than the Democrats on in this race that you felt you were able to make an impact on by running in this kind of race? Matt, did you hear that one?
Well, we're looking to see if he's muted. I'll also just mention Jeff Sutter had asked Matt, if you get a question, if you have a chance, what will you change? Also a couple notes from Connecticut about some interesting things, fun facts there. I'm looking for Matt's.
Matt says he can't unmute.
So Holly has to
Okay,
ask
got it
him.
now. Thank you.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah. So I guess I can answer that question from the chat first. What would I change? I mean, there are certainly things that didn't go the way we expected or planned. We had some database and website issues. If most people aren't aware, the first week of September, our website wasn't working. So, and there were things we could have done to avoided that. But I think in general, what I'm thinking about is with our campaign, you could divide it into thirds, right? Getting on the ballot, defending the ballot access, and then campaigning. We had roughly a 10-month-long campaign. We ended up being very reactionary, not having the ability to think and be proactive and to plan because we didn't have someone dedicated to doing exactly that. And so we took I think the idea was that once we get done with the ballot access petitioning, and in June, we'll have a month or two to get ourselves set up and get things, set. And that didn't happen. We ended up fighting the Democratic Party and the state of North Carolina. And we ended up being reactive all that time. And then, like I said, by the time that's done, it's end of August. And so now the next few months, we didn't have that opportunity to prepare ourselves, I think, the way we wanted to prepare ourselves. And so I think that would be one of the things I would do definitely is have a put together campaign plan that, of course, you go back to and adjust, but something that would keep us from being as reactionary as we were and being more proactive and kind of more forward looking. Because as most of you know, once you're involved in it, you do end up having to react more than you want, right? And you're not so much doing the type of planning that I think many of us understand you need to do to be as successful as you want to be. And then there's other things too I could get into later, but and I'm sorry, Mike, could you just repeat the end of that question?
Yeah, if you were approaching, say, a similarly big name.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Activist.
Yeah. So certainly. I think there's a lot of benefits to it, and it's the ability to speak without censorship. It's the ability to speak without consequence, the ability not to have to be concerned that what you might say may go against either the party or against the donors. And of course, as we understand, right, the donors are the ones that you're probably more concerned about. As well as too, I think the people that you do this with, the dedication, the passion, the sincerity of that, is very different than I think I may be jaded and cynical because I spent so much time in Washington, D.C., working with people like this, but I think there is a sense of genuineness that you don't encounter in the corporate parties. So I think it's those kind of aspects of running as a candidate that maybe I wasn't truly expecting, but I certainly enjoyed. And that's what I would pass on to others. And of course, there's the negative side, as you suggested earlier, Mike. Candidates who run green or who run independent or who run for PSL or who run libertarian or whatever, they are giving up institutional support that can't be replicated. In the sense of you're going to run a good, hard campaign and supports just can come out of the woodwork and you have all kinds of stuff, et cetera, et cetera. No, it's just not going to happen. And so that's something that I think people going into it have to be made aware of, is that, look, you're going to be doing a lot of this. You're going to have to, and the support that you would have if you ran and compromised your principles and your values and your beliefs and allowed your speeches to get checked by a consultant before you give them, to make sure you're not saying anything untoward. I think that far outweighs any of the benefits that you get by running in those parties.
And by the way, in our history, 139 Greens have run for U.S. Senate, which is about 5% of all races that we've run in. Robin, you mentioned before that you ran on issues that you've been working on in the community, and that really fits the historic concept of the Green Party being a movement party, generating candidates out of grassroots movements rather than being top down in the other direction. So 2 things. One, what have you built in this race? Where would you consider running again? What kind of foundation did you lay with this? And then if you're going to talk to other movements, movement activists who share the social justice movement work that you've been involved in, what would you tell them about why they should run for office and why they should run with an independent party like the Green Party?
Sure, I think the latter part I can, excuse me, I'll start there and echoing almost everything that Matt said. But yeah, I think that especially with Gen Xers and the other generations coming, I think it's very important to remain organic, as most Green Party candidates are. I think that's one of the things that were so attractive to some of the college students that actually came aboard on my campaign toward the end and helped to campaign. They were very inspired about me not taking corporate money, corporate funding, and having a different message, and not being lined up with anything duopoly, being a part of the duopoly. So I think maintaining those type relationships are key and important to any third parties moving forward, because I think it is possible one day that a non-Republican or Democrat can win and will win. And with that being said, I have to say this, candidates, we can only be as great as our support system is. And the Green Party at large has to have a stronger infrastructure for candidates to be able to run. And I'm going to say this, I want to preface this by saying first that I am not saying that I did not receive any support in Florida, but I'm very disappointed. And I want the Green Party at large to hear this. I'm very disappointed that as Mike, and I thank you for those comments about me being an organizer, social justice activist for years in my community. And some of the support lacked in Florida. And some of you may know that midway through the campaign season, there was a candidate that came up and there was long deliberations that was unnecessary. This person found it necessary to seek the endorsement of the Green Party, and their platform was that Derek Chauvin should be exonerated and that reparations should be just for anybody. And for Florida to have the audacity to even entertain that, while a candidate such as myself, who's been on the front line for healthcare, for reparatory justice, Medicare for all, for so many things, that they would even deliberate, waste time on maybe this person could give them notoriety. And I said, you know what? You are going to get notoriety, but not the way that you think you should if you endorse this candidate. So if we are to have candidates, and if we are going to win any races that are above, and this is not a put down for local races, but if we are going to be strong candidates and win, we have to have a strong infrastructure locally, statewide, and federal in the Green Party to make those. We can't do it by ourselves. We can't do it alone. And we have to, Florida and other states, we have to believe in our own platform. And when we don't do that, we fail our candidates. And I'm going to say that I feel like I've been failed, not because I lost the race, but because I feel like I wasn't worth to fight for the race. And so we can't have that. And we look back at, we've had strong Black women to represent the Green Party, and where are they now? We don't know. Cynthia McKinney, Rosa Clemente, and I think there was one more. And I'm taking time now to rethink my relationship with the Green Party, because I want to represent a party that represents me as well. I hope that makes sense, and you understand what I'm trying to say.
It does, Robin, and thanks for being frank and honest. There were two people who were on the Green Party ballot for state office or state legislature, Robin for state house, and then this other individual ran for state senate and was right wing on some very important issues. And Robin's referring to the debate they had inside their party about that individual. Cody, before we go to you for a final question, we can bleed just a little bit over time here. I know that Gloria has her hand up, and I don't know how Holly wants to moderate it, but I'm going to ask Cody one more question, and then maybe if two or three others who have questions, we could have Holly open up, let them ask their questions, and we'll have all of the questions be asked. So let's cap it at 4 hands if there are 3 more questions, and then we'll give everybody a shot there. And my question for you, Cody, is kind of along the same lines for the younger folk who we often hear don't get involved into electoral politics until later in life. Let's say that you got an invitation to go to ASU next semester and talk to a political science class, Arizona State University for you people out of the state. What message are you telling to the 20-somethings that you're and the late teenagers that you're going to meet in a class like that about why they should get into politics and why with an independent party like the Green Party?
Yeah, so I've actually had this conversation a lot with some students at ASU. I'm actually a student at ASU. I'm a public policy major with a focus on
I just guessed.
sustainability.
That's funny.
But yeah, I think that, when you really talk to especially young people, the 18 to 34 crowd, there is obvious and definite dislike for the corporate status quo, the major parties. What I think is missing, especially for younger people in that jump to really get involved in politics directly, is really this kind of sense of hope. And we sort of, I think a lot of people have come to a point, especially coming out of the pandemic, where we had this huge opportunity to really turn things around as a society and really put the needs of the many above the few, and we kind of flubbed it for the most part. And I think a lot of young people especially are so focused on just meeting the basic needs to survive day to day, paying rent, making a medical bill, getting through school so they might be able to get a decent job. And I think it's important to reach people on those issues that are those kitchen table issues, whatever age you are. And I think that another big thing is really to foster some hope. And I know that's like a big idea and sort of a big thing to think about, but I think even in small ways, just meeting up with people, checking in with them, even if it's not like, your party business meeting, but really just making sure people are doing okay, seeing what they need. In the past year or so with the Arizona Green Party, I've really gotten to know the people that I work with on a much more personal level. And I think that developing that kind of connections with people who are both in your demographic group and in your organizing group, wherever that may be, and trying to find ways that you can really connect those two based on what we have in common and what we want to see and what we want to have hope for is a really good place to start.
Great, thank you so much. We have one hand up from Gloria. I'm going to make one more comment, and when I'm done, the stack will close. So if anybody else wants to, if you know how to, you click on some place here, it says to raise your hand if you have a question. I just want to say back to Robin that I hope that you stick with the Green Party. I've been at this since 1988, and the idea of people who are rooted in their community and social justice work who decide to be Green Party candidates is a fundamental pillar of the whole theoretical basis for this party. And people like you are few and far between, and I'm thrilled that you chose to run, and I hope that you stay with it, and I hope people in your party get behind you and the kind of work that you do in the future. So, Holly, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so Gloria, I could unmute if we see, it's a little bit hard to see the screen here, but people could, if they want to raise their hands, we'll try to catch you. We can also, if you can type in the chat, if you can do that. I think we can accommodate however many more questions Michael wants to ask.
And Gloria, please also let us know before you ask your question, a little bit of your electoral history and role in the Green Party of New York State.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you to the candidates and CCC, Holly, Scott, putting this together, Mike. I was also a candidate this year, but as a write-in, because some people may know that the ballot access laws changed significantly in New York by the governor, the disgraced former governor Cuomo. So it just we could not make that hurdle of getting 45,000 signatures, and then we would have had to get 130,000 votes. But I was Howie Hawkins' running mate, but I have run before as lieutenant governor, city council twice, for president in Brooklyn once. And actually what I was going to say is kind of related to that. I mean, one of the things we emphasize in my campaign, we always ran the public campaign finance program, and we took raising money very seriously. Some of my audio on my end wasn't working, so I know Matt talked about it, some people talked about it. Robin, I really appreciate your points, Robin. But it's like, I think sometimes, yes, there's not enough infrastructure or support for our candidates, and we have to think about that. You know, one committee, even though we're a national committee, can't always do that. But I think there are some good resources that CCC, one of the things that is essential in every campaign I ran is to have a campaign plan. And you do have to keep going back to it. And you do have to readjust it, but even for your fundraising, like this is our first tier, this is our second tier, this is our third tier. If we raise this much, we do this. If we raise this much, we do that. But my experience with some Greens, and I don't know how we change this mindset, is like, not all money is evil. Money is in evil hands right now. And that's the problem. And I would say to Greens that raising money, being serious about that in your campaign and how to go about that is really important. It's my perception and my experience, it's just not a badge of honor to say, obviously we don't take corporate money, and that's important. But I mean, I guess I'm emphasizing, like, how does everybody balance the fact that you may hear from your own comrades in your state party or local, like, money's not important. Like the fact that, just let's be really grassroots. You can be grassroots in terms of the work that you're doing and the issues you're running on, and your sincerity, and the fact that you stand with a party that takes no corporate donations and no lobbyists and no influence. But if we're being for an electoral party and we choose to run, then we're going into their system, and we have to play in that system in some way, not like the Democrats and Republicans, but there's certain things that we have to do. I don't think that compromises. I guess I'm posing out there too, people feel that that's a compromise that they don't want to make. You need that money because people need to know what Robin's been doing in the community, right? They need to hear from young voices like Cody. And And that's, I think, some of the debates and the conversation we should try and have in the party around electoral politics, because sometimes the lack of support or the lack of infrastructure may be because people feel uncomfortable, like, well, we can't campaign like the corporate candidates. But we are in that arena. So how do we reconcile that? Sorry.
Great,
Pat.
thank you, Gloria, talking about being in the system while also trying to transform it at the same time and the challenges that go with that. Kathy Deppie from Los Angeles, one of my local allies, also has a follow-up question, and then we'll open it up to the candidates to respond. Kathy.
Actually, I'm Alex Walker, also from Los Angeles.
Oh, it's Alex. Oh, great. Hey, Alex. All right.
Well, we're both on here, but I wish we had it. Maybe somewhere along the line, we should have another session to really talk about this, because I put a question in the chat. I said, what is, quote, social justice, unquote? I mean, well, I'll just come right out and say it. Black Lives Matter and woke anti-racism has been captured by the Democratic Party and the corporations. And I just don't know if it's going to help people to understand the deep philosophy of the Green Party by trying to sort of out-Democrat the Democrats when it comes to these things. I'd like to know what kind of a reaction that Robin got about talking about reparations. Frankly, it's a dead issue around here. People are concerned, it so happens that so-called people of color are concerned about the same damn things that everybody else is concerned with. They are concerned about the environment. They're concerned about fossil fuels. They're concerned about healthcare. They're concerned about schools, which are awful in Los Angeles. And I really have, I say I have my doubts as to what degree that's really going to help build the Green Party, using their slogans. And that's all I need. That's all I'm going to say.
Thanks, Alex. And as context, Alex happens to be a African-American green activist in South Los Angeles. We heard from both of them. Anybody else want to get a question in before we open it up to our candidates to respond to what they've just heard? Going once, twice? Okay. So we heard from both Robin and Alex. Any of the four of you want to respond, and we'll close it with your responses. Robin, you want to start from what you heard from Alex? Holly, I think you have to unmute again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was a question or just a comment. But yeah, I mean, we're the only, as far as reparations, the Green Party is the only party that has reparations in our platform, and it's a real large topic that it's never ending. And I believe there's more than one way to reparations, to full repair in our communities. As far as Black Lives Matter, for me, I always say that Black Power matters, because unless, kind of like what someone shared about the Black Panthers, until we have power, our lives won't matter. So we need power in healthcare. We need power in all those social justice platforms, whether it, like I said, healthcare, financial freedom. We need power in that, because we're powerless until the wealth system is turned over and revolutionized. And we could go on, and I know I don't have time for that, but that's a real big topic, and maybe we can discuss it sometime in another webinar or something.
Great, thank you. And Gloria's comments about money, taking money seriously. Matt, close to $200,000. You were able to hire a campaign manager, which allowed you to be the candidate and allowed Rose to do the managing. How did you feel about asking for money?
I mean, I've done it before, and I've been in the nonprofit world now for 13 years, and like I said, I was on the board of directors for a PAC, for 5 years in DC, and so I had experience with it. And I will say this about fundraising: it's an art and a science. And if you think you're going to do it by just sending emails to people every week, you're kidding yourself. This is something that you need a professional for, just as you need a professional to do your video, right? Just as you need a professional to put your website together, or manage your database. You know, this is not something that you can do ad hoc and expect significant results. So I think the aspects I would say about the fundraising is that it has to be professionalized and it has to be given a priority where you're also going to pay for it. So it'd be in the sense that you will have to pay people to do this type of work. And the same thing too, we would not have made the ballot if we hadn't raised the money to do so, because we couldn't afford it. We could not have afforded to pay our people to be out there 10, 20, 30 hours a week for the better part of 2.5 months to collect those signatures, right? You know, I mean, and then of course we talk about money in all other ways, but that's, I think, about one thing about it to get across is that it has to be professionalized and it has to be given a very high priority, because I completely agree with Gloria. While money is not evil, it's in evil hands. But, you know, we're kidding ourselves. In our case, say 7.4 million registered voters in North Carolina, how are you going to get across to them? How many, if you go to Pride festivals, Oktoberfests, you know, different events, you know, you're out there, you're going to all the candidate forums, you're replying to all the candidate questionnaires. How many people are you actually going to reach that way? And what we found is that we were in a lot of non-political spaces. What we found is vast majority of people had never, ever heard of the Green Party. So not only are you trying to build name recognition, you're trying to build party recognition as well. You know, I mean, on election day, you're standing outside the ballot, the polling place, you know, and people don't know where the Green Party stands on an issue like abortion. Has no idea if the Green Party, I mean, that was everyone I spoke to, right, on election day. There were very few people who knew what we were about or who we were, right? So how do you reach people if you don't have the money to, you know, do the type of video, say, that you need to just get that name recognition, party recognition built? But yeah, I certainly could go on for quite a while about this. But this has been really great, you know, listening to Doug, Rob, and Cody. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Great. I have a final for both Robin and Cody, and just to put some of the finances in context, I was elected first in 1996 to my local city council and reelected in 2000. In my 2000 campaign, now Santa Monica is 93,000 residents, 62,000 registered voters, both with money I raised directly and what was spent on me by independent expenditures by local labor and tenants union. There was about $175,000 spent to get me onto the city council. And then I was chosen as mayor. And that's because real estate is so pricey in Santa Monica, the stakes are high. But yeah, it's serious money. So Cody, you're going to raise money to get on the ballot next time around. And Doug, how are you guys going to raise the money to get the party on the ballot for 2024? Cody first.
Yeah, so I guess I would say that out of this cycle, I was probably the outlier in deliberately choosing not to raise or spend any money. Going in at the last minute as a write-in candidate, we kind of knew what this campaign and what it wasn't. We knew what we could realistically expect to achieve and what was likely out of our hands at this point in the 2022 midterms. But I think there is still, you know, I think there's still space for those kinds of campaigns and those kinds of candidates if we're seeing the purpose of running elections not just to be elected. You know, that's great, and obviously we want that, but part of the reason that we run is really just to get our ideas out there and to talk to people and to bring up the green message to the current generation of voters, which I don't really think have heard much from the Green Party, at least not directly from ourselves. So as far as raising money next time, I will hopefully, if there is a next time, I will certainly start a lot earlier and maybe have a little bit more of the campaign actually planned out and have a team. But I think right now my big focus is really rebuilding my state and my local here at the grassroots and trying to bring whatever expertise I have to hopefully a new generation of candidates who are going to be running in the next 2, 4, 6, 8 years.
Sounds great. Thank you. And Douglas, Lary, Connecticut, what's going to happen? You guys going to how are you going to get back on the ballot? And who do you ask for money? And what do you tell them? Given that the state, as you're saying, seems to be tighter and tighter between the major
Well,
parties.
Our strategy will be to first run in this odd year, the municipal year in Connecticut. Having municipal candidates gives good visibility, and that allows donors to actually see Greens who are near them. Most of our donors tend to be people who know the candidates. And so the better the candidate is known, the more likely it is we will raise money. One of the ironies about money in Connecticut is that many of our smaller communities who run Green candidates raise more money than the entire state party does. I mean, if you're wondering why Connecticut Greens aren't doing too well, it's because they think they can live on an $1,100 budget, which is nuts. I have a $6,000 to $7,000 budget for one town. And so there's just a sense of realism that's sometimes missing. Money is important. It lets you do things. If Holly lets me share a screen, I'll give you an example of one of the things one can do with money. But you can see the signs behind me, for instance. That's one example. And we reuse signs. You'll notice my yellow one here has a split down the center horizontally. That's so we can change who the candidate is and reuse the bottom. Or take my name and put it on some other race. I mean, if we're going to bother using plastic, for heaven's sakes, we're going to use it till it crumbles. And so I have a barn full of green signs, and we go out there and we sort of reconnect Charlie Krish to town council, or maybe Cass Martineau is now running for Registrar of Voters instead of the House of Representatives. So those are the sorts of things we try to do with money. I'm going to show you a thing we do with money, and this is really popular. This is a Connecticut ballot. It happens to be a municipal year ballot. It won't necessarily look anything like your states or your towns, but across the top we have races, and down the side we have parties. So naturally I filled in all the little bubbles where we have green candidates, just so people would understand we're not a one candidate party in my town. We ran 9 candidates, and we think that helps a lot. Each candidate brings their own friends and supporters and donations, and it's somewhat exponential. When we run one candidate, we don't do too well. When we run several candidates, we do better. This year in the state race, we tried to run local candidates wherever we could just to get a second, third green on the line to help support bigger candidates. So here we've highlighted where we're running. And then we've actually presented images of these people. Most of us are fairly well known in town. I think out of this particular year, 8 candidates, I think maybe one of them was not well known. We had little boxes down here that tell people what else we've done. We have a reputation history of being commissioners, justices of the peace. Several of us have been incumbents before. And so we're a pretty serious party in town, and we let people know it. But we're the only party doing this. Year after year, I send out this ballot, and I get the nicest little responses back from people about how this is the first time they've seen who they're going to be voting for. And so I recommend this technique if your ballot design lends itself to this sort of thing. Here's the backside where we had 2 more candidates. And part of what this did for us was help show diversity in our candidates' ages and genders and shades and sexual preferences. We had diversity. It's not just on our sign. This is our most popular sign in town is respect for diversity, one of the 10 key values. And we get a lot of demand for that. I have to buy more of those signs from time to time because people don't give them back. All right, so those are examples of things you can do with money. For us, It takes about $800 to send out this postcard to each district we choose to send it to and to the set of voters we think are likely to vote. It would cost far more than that to send it to all voters, but we think we get a good bang out of this buck. And we got 6 out of 9 candidates elected using this technique.
Well,
Thank
that's
you.
a very positive note, I think, to bring us to a close for tonight. And thanks to our candidates for coming. Thanks to the Coordinated Campaign Committee for its ongoing 52-week-a-year work to track and support Green candidates around the country. And all of you in your home states, please talk with your colleagues, your Green friends, community activists, and continue to develop more viable Green Party candidates in the future. Thanks so much to everyone. Holly?
Thanks everyone for coming. Thank you very much, Mike Feinstein, for this great job moderating. Thank you, Matt, Doug, Cody, and Robin for being guests. And thanks to other candidates. I don't even want to say, I know I saw Justin and a few others. Sorry if I'm missing people, but others have been on other of our webinars or Green Waves, and we're going to have more. So again, I put in the chat a number of bits and pieces of information. Anybody who'd like to know more can write us, check out our website, and consider running for especially candidates or people who have this particular interest. We hope to see you back. Justin also mentioned, well, we'll have more information out about what's available we're going to do for the candidates going forward. So thank you, and see you all on the campaign trail, as he says, and next month. Hope you all found this worthwhile. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.